Thank you to Workforce Planning for having us part of this initiative. Emily is, if I can just say, we're in grant writing mode right now, and there's a whole bunch of deadlines this week. So I know she's kind of coming in and out, but I'll take you through the journey, and Emily can join us when. Oh, there's Em.
Sorry, here I am. Sorry, I was on another call. Hi, everyone. My apologies.
No worries. It is that kind of week. So thank you for this
is.
opportunity to share with you. A number of you on the call are already well versed in Challenge 2025. So we will provide kind of an overview of Challenge 2025, and then I'm going to speak a little bit more particularly about a more recent initiative within this broader umbrella, which is funded by the federal government as part of the Future Skills Center initiative. But I think there were a number of questions that came up as a result of the previous presentation, and I think there's some connections between the previous presentation and the focus on making distinctions between academic credentials and actual competencies, and competencies being kind of a combination of knowledge, attitudes, and skills as they're applied in real world situations. I think we'll also touch on the role of the employer, and perhaps recognizing there's the ideal case where the employer, historically may have played a much more hands-on role in training and onboarding new hires, but recognizing the role that Mohawk College, and particularly our access programs under City School, what we're hoping to do, or what we're in the process of doing, in terms of trying to bridge some gaps, particularly for people who are not connected to the labor market, have greater barriers to employment, and historically to education as well. So this is kind of our attempt to navigate some of these challenging circumstances with the tools that we have in our toolbox, and through the wonderful partnerships that we have with other members of the community. So I'm gonna start our presentation. I'm wondering then if you could start by sharing a little bit of the background and history around Challenge 2025.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bear with me 1 second. I just want to make sure. Okay, there we go.
Okay, so thank you, Jody. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. It's really great for Jody and I to be here. And as Jody mentioned, we're just going to share with you just a very, very brief overview of Challenge 2025 and our workforce initiative. This slide kind of gives you the key points of the intended impact of Challenge 2025. But the vision for Challenge 2025 is to leverage the early success of City School with the development of a responsive, scalable model that can be deployed quickly and replicated in many jurisdictions. So the intended impact of what we're trying to do is to build a demand-driven approach to employment for Hamiltonians, to bridge the gap between employers who need work and people who need work, and people who need work, delivering education and supports for participants who need access and to get some retraining for meaningful employment, and then taking what we've learned and scaling that to address poverty and enhance opportunity, not only in our own community, but within the broader Hamilton, and as Jody will talk later, on a national scale. Next slide. So this is a very high level view of the Challenge 2025 model. And this slide provides the model, which is predicated on using a demand-led workforce development strategy with a dedicated internal secretariat and a stewardship committee combined of multiple partners within the community. The Challenge 2025 initiative will support employers gaining skilled workers to support their resource needs with a reduction in the regional skills gap, a reduction in participants, and bridges to education and employment, offering transferable soft skills such as self-confidence, self-efficacy, and workplace cultural awareness, and technical skills such as job competencies, work procedures, and health and safety. And it will also support benefits to the entire community such as improved resiliency and shared prosperity, higher rates of employment, and generational change within families of its students. It's important to note that this model includes a primary goal of transitioning 3,000 individuals in Hamilton currently receiving support through Ontario Works Income Support Program to gain employment over the next 5 years. Next slide. So as you can see, this ecosystem it's again very high level summary of some of the work that we've been doing and some of the partners we've been engaging, but the priorities of bridging employment for marginalized communities by using a demand-led model requires multiple levels of partnership. We are leveraging government, community, and industry relationships to develop engagement strategies and programming opportunities to ensure that there are multiple entry points for residents to gain the fundamental skills that will support the acquisition of successful employment. These are some examples of our funding partners, our community partners, and our employer partners. And through the City School Initiative, we've done lots of work already with many of these partners and in leveraging some of the funding that's available. But over the next 5 years, we will continue to resource these opportunities and continue to look at sectors that are high priority, where there are lots of job opportunities, particularly with the changes that COVID has provided or allowed us to focus on. So now, Jody, I'll turn it over to you to talk about our Future Skills project.
Great, thank you, Emily. So as Emily noted, these initiatives have grown out of our city school model, and I think many of you around the call are familiar to us, but for those who aren't as well versed with city school, we are the access branch, or one of the access programs of Mohawk College, where we provide free college and employment pathways programming to the community. So historically, prior to COVID, we would physically go out into the community, deliver our programs in familiar, comfortable settings for residents of Hamilton, as well as the surrounding region. We strive to ensure that all our programs are at no cost to participants. There's no tuition fees associated, and that any materials, supplies, equipment, clothing even, that they would require for the programming, we provide as part of our wraparound support. We are particularly targeting individuals 19 plus who are considered, I guess our priority criteria are people who've never attended or have not completed post-secondary training education of any sort, so college, a university, or a trades program. If people have not participated in post-secondary education, they are prioritized, and or people who are in receipt of social assistance or currently unemployed. So we're really looking at education and training as pathways to greater self-sufficiency, quality of life, prosperity. And we're looking at it through an individual lens, but because of our broader mandate around Challenge 2025, really looking at healthy individuals, healthy, thriving individuals in healthy, thriving communities. And so in order to deliver on these goals and to support these programs, we do leverage provincial and federal funding, private donors as well. We're very grateful for that support. And so the Future Skills Center project, the material handling project, it's probably about 1.5 years in the making. We're coming to a critical point where we're about to begin delivering in the spring. The Future Skills Center, this is federal funding handled through Ryerson University, kind of houses Future Skills Center. And their projects are really, the initiatives they fund are skill building towards employment and prosperity with a research component. So we've been funded to both deliver programming, but also to engage in rigorous research in order to understand both our implementation, but as well as our impact. And as Emily identified, our demand-led approach means that we are really tailoring our employment pathways programming to reflect, as best as we understand it, the current labor market shortages and the needs and preferences of employers, as well as understanding the populations we're hoping to recruit to participate. And so some of you participated in an earlier Challenge 2025 call earlier today, where we talked about researching or investigating, exploring the needs and priorities of persons in receipt of Ontario Works, for instance. And so that's been very important for us to kind of understand where the points of convergence are. What is the latent labor market? What are they interested in doing? What sectors are they interested in? Are they even aware that some of these sectors and opportunities exist? And then likewise, from the employer's point of view, do they have, and we're very specific, so sometimes it helps to be very concrete. Our programs that we design through our Employment Pathways program, because they are for folks who don't have prior post-secondary and are really about rapidly moving to employment, our focus is on jobs that individuals, if an individual participates in a 3 or 4 month intensive training program, they can exit with competencies that will allow them to be hired by employers with a livable wage. So that's really kind of what's driving this. When we design our programs, we are tying our curriculum directly to local employers who are interested and ready to hire people. And so with the material handling initiative, early on, it was identified that because Hamilton is really a hub, we have our waterways, our airport, rail system. We are a hub for goods movement. And so, and recognizing the modernization of goods movement, we strive to, in a sense, kind of conceptualize a program that would focus on material handling, which is essentially goods movement logistics, but perhaps a little bit more broadly defined. And it's been a process where we have worked to better understand the sector, better understand the needs of employers, and to really reflect on how we are designing and about to deliver. Our first cohort will be delivered in April. We're delivering 9 cohorts locally over the next year and a half, 2 years. And these will be online deliveries in light of COVID and some of the restrictions. But we have built in a combination of technical skills as well as 21st century. They're more generic skills for life and learning is probably a good way to describe them. I will delve into that a little bit deeper in the next slide. But we've really sought to look at that combination of what's historically called the hard skills and the soft skills, and how we blend them to create a curriculum and a learning experience that's meaningful for the students, but also at the other end, where they'll be employable. We are building in micro certifications into the process, and so there will be micro certifications around the hard skills, but also specifically around some of these 21st century skills. And we had a very specific process for narrowing down or focusing on which 21st century skills we want to incorporate in the curriculum. So I'll talk a little bit more about that too. We have built in work placements. Future Skills Center was gracious enough to award us our full grant request so that we can subsidize the work placements following the structured curriculum. So that certainly incentivizes the employers to participate and give our folks a chance. And because this is a research project, we are measuring a number of indicators throughout the process. We are also, and I believe Emily mentioned this, we are also replicating this in 3 communities elsewhere elsewhere in the country. So we are working with a college in British Columbia, one in Manitoba, as well as Nova Scotia, to replicate in their community, because these are also communities that have a high demand around material handling, port cities with airports in 2 cases, and Manitoba being not far from the Great Lakes, Winnipeg not being far from the Great Lakes, but also a hub for rail transport across the country. And all communities have similar populations that we're trying to reach, which are those, again, with barriers to education and employment. So a little bit more about the skills and kind of delve into that a little bit deeper. So what we've come to understand as well is if there's an opportunity to link our curriculum to certifications that are recognized within the broader industry. So sometimes, again, I think the comment was made, the distinction between having a degree or a diploma or certificate or a college certificate in a particular subject area versus some of these certifications that are recognized, like lean certification, for instance, by industry. And so we've capitalized on some work undertaken by the Manufacturing Skills Standards Council in the US that have developed a number of online certifications. And so we're working with them to incorporate these standardized certifications that people would typically sign up and they'd work through independently on their own. We're recognizing with our learners that if we provide a conduit to such, but also that we wrap around actual instruction and debriefing and additional teaching opportunities to reinforce these concepts, they'll be better positioned to succeed, to pass the tests that lead to certification from the MSSC. And so all participants, the aim is that all participants will receive what we're calling the logistics associate, but there may be individuals who come in who progress at a quicker pace, may already come in with some knowledge or experience, for instance, or just learning quickly, and they can go on to receive a kind of an additional level of certification. So with regard to the 21st century skills, I think this is an interesting piece and really maps on to a certain degree with what was discussed by the previous presenters. We recognized with this kind of these skills for life and learning, these generic skills, sometimes referred to as soft skills, that similar to points raised earlier, people can use terminology, but how does it actually translate into the workplace? So employers say they like positive work ethic. Well, what does that actually look like in their workplace? Can you, in a sense, operationalize it, make it concrete? And so what we looked to was in the college and university sector, particularly out of the US, the American Association of Colleges and Universities has something called the value rubrics. And these are, as appears on the right-hand side, that colorful chart there. They have developed a really detailed rubric model tied to these various skills clusters that basically represents what an undergraduate student, when they complete their undergraduate education, whether that's a diploma or degree, in a sense, what they should exit with in order to thrive. And so these are increasingly being adopted throughout post-secondary institutions for their full-time programs. What we wanted to better understand was, could we, in a sense, adapt these rubrics and maybe focus on a smaller number, 5 or 6, and adapt them for to guide curriculum development, but also assessment for the folks that we're serving in our programs. And we wanted to make sure that we picked the right skills to map onto employers with this material handling focus. And so we engaged in kind of 3 connected activities. With the help of Workforce Planning Hamilton, we did draw some information from job postings where we looked at the skills that were identified in the job postings within this sector for a period of time. And I believe it was January to September of 2020. Thank you to Victor, a shout out to Victor on the call, who helped draw some of that information. We partner internally with someone from the college who is an academic researcher, and this is her area of expertise, and she has some research grants to really look at these skills and their application in educational settings. So she was able to look at those postings, look at the descriptions and how these are kind of fleshed out within the value rubrics, and kind of identify the top half dozen that are most relevant. What we were also able to do, she created a survey tool where it's for employers to actually rate how important these things are in their workplace setting, but not using this terminology necessarily. And it goes back to if you just ask someone, how important is work ethic in your workplace? Sometimes it's hard to it's hard to know if you're all talking about the same thing. But what she did was created and kind of a validated survey tool to delve into these skills in application. And we were able to get a number of employers to respond to the survey. She was able to undertake some data analysis on that survey. And from this, again, 5 or 6 of the areas kind of percolated up to the top, and those appeared to correspond, thankfully, with some of the terminology that was appearing in the job postings. We also held a focus group with employers, and this was an opportunity to discuss their needs and flesh things out a little bit. And so, as you can see, we've tried to draw data from different points to kind of triangulate, to ensure we're getting a good handle on what the competencies are that we want to incorporate in the curriculum. And so we're in the midst of developing the curriculum so that we can start delivering in the spring, but it really will be tying and weaving in these skills alongside, wherever possible, concrete scenarios or application to the material handling sector. So that was a kind of a theme that came up in our discussions, both with educators and employers, is the generalizability of skill sets. People learn things in the classroom, they don't necessarily apply them in the workplace. They don't see how they're transferable or applicable. So we're really trying to look at how these skills apply, how we can reinforce them in the classroom, how we can assess them. So the structured, consistent ways of assessing the skills are very important for this process. And then participants will get individual micro-credentials, but then an overall kind of recognition for completion of this initiative. So I think it draws on some of the comments earlier about needing to take advantage of the data that's available, but that sometimes we do need to delve a little bit deeper with specific employers to make sure that what we understand as their priorities for competencies, that our understanding is correct, and that our understanding of that translates into actual training programs that develop those competencies. So as part of the research, we're going to be assessing, do learners come through this process in a sense more employable? So so the employers that they're placed with, we will get feedback from the employers as to these competencies and their observed application in the workplace. And also we'll have focus groups with the employers to debrief. And with the help of Future Skills Canada, we will be able to actually, or there's a piece of the research that will be following some of these learners over years through government data to understand their employment trajectories, employment and earning trajectories. So whether this actually has made a difference in people's lives. So I think that about captures it. I'm not sure how we're doing for time, but I'm happy to answer any questions or elaborate on any of the points that were raised. And certainly if anyone has any questions, I'll share the PowerPoint presentation with Marcy. If anyone wants to reach out to us directly, we're also happy to answer questions at any time.
Thanks, Jody and Emily. We have a couple of minutes if anyone has any questions. Once again, probably the best way is to put it in the chat box and we can ask Jody and Emily the questions. Thank you for that. That was a great summary of the program. And it's interesting how it really connected well into what Stephen and Anthony were talking about. So of course we arranged it that way, right, Jody?
Yes, when I saw the agenda, I'm like, oh, this is good. We're we're in the right place.
Okay.
Yes, many of you around the table are already familiar with Challenge 2025, so may not have any questions about that. We can share also just if anyone's interested in the value rubrics. They're an interesting thing to take a look at, so I can forward, I can share that as well. If you are involved in education and training programs, it's quite interesting to see. But there was a question, so that
would be interesting actually to see that. So the question is, just to clarify, if someone with a diploma from Mohawk from 10 years ago would not be eligible?
What we would say is it's about, for us, because these are fully funded programs that are free to the community, the focus is on people who are essentially experiencing poverty right now, lower socioeconomic status. So what we do have folks who participate in city school programs who do have credentials, but it may be that those credentials they have found themselves, you know, we serve a diverse population. So in some cases, there may be folks who've had addiction or mental health concerns and can't return to as part of kind of their process of recovery. They've made a decision they can't return to the work that they were involved in previously. They may be in receipt of social assistance right now. But generally speaking, a number of our programs, the funders even set a kind of a prerequisite that if you are employed, fully employed, more than 20 hours a week, above a certain, above the LICO, the low income cutoff, you're not typically eligible for our programs, right? Because they are meant to really meet the needs of an underserved population or those who have barriers. So
Okay.
it's not a no if you do have a credential, but we'd probably like to know a little bit more about your personal circumstances to make sure that you're a good fit and that it's not, we're not duplicating other services and supports.